Okay. All right. So welcome, Chris, to the YouTube series on employee ownership. So I'm just going to briefly introduce myself, and then I'll ask you to also introduce yourself and also PC Construction, just a little bit about the company as well. And then we can get started. But before maybe the introductions, just what are my objectives for this YouTube series? So maybe the other way around. Let me start with introducing myself. So I'm Lizah Makombore. I'm originally from South Africa. I'm studying for a PhD in sustainable development, economics, public policy and governance, such a long mouthful word. So we shorten it to SDPEGs at the University of Vermont. I'm also a fellow with the Ghana Institute for the Environment and the Leadership for the Ecozoic. My research interests are broadly at the intersection of cooperative economies, shared wealth, inequality, and the ecological crisis. I am currently doing a summer internship with the Vermont Employee Ownership Center here in Burlington, Vermont, where I am investigating employee ownership broadly, looking at that particular social innovation and how it fits in with my broader research interests. So I have with me Chris Moran. He's from PC Construction. PC Construction is a 100% employee-owned company, but I'll let Chris introduce himself, and then we're going to broadly speak on employee ownership, but I guess my objective is to educate and bring awareness about employee ownership, specifically through employee stock ownership plans, what we are going to be referring to as ESOPs, and also to amplify the work that Vermont Employee Ownership Center is doing here in Vermont, specifically some of the programs that they have to assist companies that are transitioning or are already employee-owned companies. So that's what we'll be speaking about today. So I'll let Chris introduce himself and PC Construction, then we'll get into the interview. Thanks, Chris.
Great, thanks, Lizah. Yeah, so Chris Moran, employee owner with PC Construction Company, formerly known as Pizza Galley Construction Company before we became 100% employee owned and changed our name. And I've been involved with this company since I left college, so 40 years. And I was also requested to help in that transition to employee ownership. So I didn't even know what it was all about. And suddenly I got immersed in it, and quickly, the more I learned, became more and more passionate about it, and was fortunate enough to be able to join the Vermont Employee Ownership Center board quite a number of years ago. Can't remember exactly how. So I have a passion for employee ownership and what it can do for the individuals in employee-owned companies, but also more broadly, just for our society.
Wow. Thank you, Chris. Chris is being very humble. I have gone and done a little bit of research. I've seen he's truly committed to employee ownership, not only for PC Construction, but for the whole community, like he said. And I gathered from the research I did, he's always led these community-wide employee ownership projects. We'll talk a little bit about that right at the end. But I'm just going to start off by saying, would you care to explain a little bit about what motivated the previous business owner to transition from being privately owned into an employee-owned company? And maybe also just to educate whoever will be listening to us, what an ESOP is, and using that vehicle to transition into employee ownership. But spend a little bit on the motivations, like what really motivated, why did the owner not perhaps go for private equity, or even like a partnership model, if there's something like that in your sector. I'm very curious to really understand this, because construction is a very different sort of industry, and why, because I was looking even at your website and seeing all these employee owners, with on the ground, and it's amazing. I want to know, like, what motivated them and why they didn't become privately owned or carry on maybe to another buyer. I will also share with you, there's some research that shows that when it comes to succession planning, 60% of business owners don't have a plan, 35% don't find a suitable sort of buyer, and 5% have a comprehensive plan. And I guess in this case, the previous owner had a plan. It might not have been that clear, but the success of PC construction at the moment and being 100% employee-owned company speaks a lot. And I also picked up, I know I'm like putting layers on the question, but I want to give context. I've picked up from your website that there's a lot of reliance on history. So if you go on PC Construction's website, you're gonna see the 1950s, the 60s. So just share with us what that journey entailed to transition, and what were the motivations to transition to an employee-owned company, and specifically using ESOPs.
All right, well, there's a lot to unpack there, Lizah. So if I get lost and wander off into the jungle,
I'll
pull me
bring
back
you in.
Okay. So, right, Pizzagalli Construction was privately owned company, 3 brothers that owned the company. And they were getting ready to exit. So, typical thing that happened. So it was like, okay, we want to, reap the benefits of all of our labor. And I can't know their inner thoughts, but my understanding from during those times, oh, sorry, I'm getting a call. I'm going to hang up. There we go. Is that, we were a really going concern, up and down the East Coast, very profitable company. And they could have sold to an outside buyer. And if they had done that, a lot would have changed, right? And here we are headquartered in little old Vermont, and most likely you would get bought out by a firm that was large enough to buy us, would have been city-based, Boston, New York, whatever. And typically when that happens, they kind of replace management, the culture changes everything. And the brothers had built, along with all the employees, had built just a really special place. I mean, people referred to it as a family. And many, many employees were very long-term. Some of them almost from day one that the company was founded. And they wanted to preserve that culture, the legacy of the company, and particularly, protect these family members almost that had come along through the years. So that's why, I got a call from Jim Pizzagalli one day, hey, can you come over and see me, Chris? And I'm like, oh God, what did I do? And that's when he told me that they were interested in going down the employee ownership route. And just to pause there on employee ownership route, We went with an employee stock ownership plan, that's part of ERISA, the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of, I think, 1974. But essentially, it's a vehicle through a retirement plan to transition to employee ownership. And I won't go into any more detail than that. I'll leave that to experts better than I with the history. But what we decided to do is, or what the brothers decided to do, was to do that transition over a period of time. Sometimes people do 100% transition and they get out, and they wanted to stay in with the company and continue to lead the company, and make sure we're successful. And if you think about that, I mean, they had an option to just sell it, get all their money, go off to whatever they wanted to do next. They had other companies that they had, which they were involved in. So by doing it this way and staying involved for a while, they already had a succession plan in place, but they wanted the leadership to be able to continue to grow under their guidance. That was really, if you think about it, that the only reason to do that was because you believed in the people and in the culture. So that was pretty special. And to fund it, we always had profit sharing. So we make money, a certain percentage of that would go to employees. There was also very generous retirement plan benefit. So the company matched 2-for-1 on employees' deferrals up to a total of 6%, which was very generous, particularly for the day. So in order to fund it, what they decided to do is they would take the profits every year, and instead of doing the profit sharing, that would go to buy stock. So then you're still getting profit sharing, but in the form of stock. And they took part of that match and put it into the ESOP in order to fund the ESOP. So, we continued to grow that over the years, and they also just would say, hey, we made extra money this year, and I know the formula says this is how much the profit sharing should be, but we're going to throw an extra $1 million into there. So another thing that I think was very unique is that, as you said, we're a construction company. Typically in construction companies, you get the management or the office folks, and then you have all your craft, the people who are putting the value in place in the field, and a lot of employees that were those craft workers, those skilled folks out in the field that have been with the company for years. And typically the way a formula works is that when you're allocating shares within an employee stock ownership plan, you take somebody's salary, how much money they had made, divided by the salaries of everybody, and that's your percentage. But they wanted to really reward those long-term craft employees, and came up with a formula we did this for, I think, the first 4 years, where essentially you took your years of service. So if you had been with the company 30 years, you took your years of service and multiplied it by 4,000, or is it 400? So if you were 30 years, that was equivalent of making $120,000 a year. Plus you added your salary on, and then that would be divided into everybody else's. So it really rewarded those long-term employees, and particularly the long-term craft employees. So I think that really speaks highly to their desire to carry on the tradition, to take care of those who helped build the company. Now, I know there's about 5 other questions, Lizah, that you asked, but why don't you direct me to where you want me to go?
Well, because you are like explaining a lot about the sort of the posture that they had. They really were thinking of the sustainability of the company, the legacy, and it's also coming from a strong culture of recognizing that there's a mutually beneficial relationship between the employees and the company. And I think that's what I wanted you to highlight. And I think most companies do end up, because you spend most of your time at work, right? So
Right.
that family thing, and these are the people you share with. But I wanted you to touch on why did they even consider other forms of exits, like private equity, or to them it was just a natural sort of a gradual transition?
So really, I think in our industry, there's three
Ways.
most common ways. And one is if another construction company buys you as a strategic buy, right? Oh, we'd love to have that market they're in. So, or it's complementary to ours. So they'll give you a bump up in price for that strategic buy. Probably the most common one is that it just keeps getting passed on down through the generations in the family. In this case, there weren't any family members who really wanted to take that on. I mean, it's big, it's a big company. And then the third is that you have management who gradually gets more and more ownership, buys their way into it, and then goes and gets a loan and buys it. And then, of course, there's the employee ownership as being that next possibility. We did have 20% of the company was owned by management, which is a very common practice. You want the key management in the company to really have, skin in the game. And so that remained that way until the brothers were 100% bought out. And then it was like, okay, well, for a lot of different reasons, we need to go 100%. So then the rest of the management was bought out.
Okay, great. So I think it goes back to that research I was telling you about, where 60% of the business owners do not have a plan. 35% think to be like, naturally, I'm going to get a buyer. And then you find out that the buyers who are out there don't have the same values, or you don't want to take the company in that route. And then the 5% are these three brothers who at least were thinking about it and had reflected a lot on, the next steps and what they wanted to see, because it comes out even in all the plans that you were, how they calculated the contributions, and, recognizing that they really wanted to reward the craft workers in a tangible manner. So you have totally exhausted that question. So I'm going to go on to a second question, which is around what are some of the current benefits that you see from being 100% employee-owned company? I know you have worked all your life, so there will be a little bit of bias in PC construction, but you did have experience of the different phases whilst it was transitioning. But if you are to reflect, like currently, like where you stand now, what are some of the benefits of being 100% employee-owned company?
So that's actually a really more complex question than you might think, right?
Okay.
So if nothing changes, you really have just a little bit extra generous retirement plan. Okay. Which is a great thing, right? But that's really the only difference. So, in order for that, all the other benefits to blossom, there has to be a lot of work around building ownership thinking and that ownership culture, because it's a retirement plan. If you're 22 and starting with a company, and it's like, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to get stock, and when you turn 65, you might get it.
Like a savings culture, right? It's like you're trying, like I'm thinking as a mother, I'm trying to teach my kids to save. Like, okay, what's the benefit when I'm 65? Tell me about now.
Right, exactly. So, I think maybe I'll talk a minute about that building of that culture, and then and then
Okay.
what do you get from the benefits once you get there?
Mhm.
And I'd say for us, and I suspect this is true of other companies, it is not a straight line. You start to build a culture and then you kind of, oops, we slide off, and then, well, now we're starting to do something better.
Mhm.
And we're 23 years into this,
Mhm.
and we're still figuring out. You always will be.
Okay.
So it's something that takes continuous nurturing, like a garden, right?
Okay.
Go out there and water it and pull the weeds, then eventually it's just going to get overrun.
Mhm.
So I'd say number one, and this took quite a while to happen, is that your privately held company was the brother's company,
Mhm.
and so the information was fairly close to the chest as far as how much money you're making and lots of other things.
Mhm.
And so we've transitioned lots of different steps along the way, but we have I think it's every 2 months town hall meeting now.
Okay.
And so where the CEO gives sort of, here's where we're at, here's how we're doing on profit, here's what jobs we got coming up, here's where we're at with safety, just sort of a
Mhm.
state of affairs. But then everybody in the company, every single person can
Mhm.
log into this meeting, whether it's on their phone in the
Okay.
field or in the office, and they can log in as PCEO, PC
Mhm.
employee owner, if they want to
Wow.
remain anonymous.
Mhm.
Which most people do, not
Mhm.
necessarily that they have to name anonymous. It's just kind of like,
Mhm.
you're anonymous, so let's go that
Mhm.
way. And you
Mhm.
can ask anything,
Wow.
any question you want, and it will get an answer. And if the answer isn't known, then it's like, okay, we're going to follow up and we're going to send out that information. So that level of transparency,
Mm.
a if you understand the business, you understand what's going
Mhm.
on, and you feel like you're in the know, then that gives you the power. Knowledge is power, right? To
Mhm.
go, oh, here's where I can contribute. It
Okay.
helps you be connected to the whole.
Mhm.
Um, and I lost the second piece to that,
Okay.
but I'll come
You
back
bring
around
it,
to it.
yeah. But it
Uh,
must be, maybe if I can, it must be very difficult to transition from, being sort of like how you put it, close chest, to being transparent like that. That must be quite difficult.
yeah,
I would think, yeah. Mhm.
absolutely. It
Mhm.
took a very long time, and it took some leadership
Mhm.
chutzpah, I guess I'll call it, because if
Mhm.
you're the CEO and you're putting yourself out there to some very tough questions,
Mhm.
think about coming in the pandemic and being asked, are
Wow.
there going to be layoffs? And having to
Yeah.
say, I'm about to get emotional about this, but our CEO came to
Mhm.
tears. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry, but we're doing everything we can to keep everybody as long as we can, but it's going to happen. And, that's remarkable to be
Mhm.
able to have the leader of your company just be uh, right up
Mhm.
front with you.
Yeah.
So you begin to build that. So it's very difficult.
Mhm.
But once you get there, then there's an expectation. Oh, and the other piece now came back to me
Mhm.
is that part of that uh, agreement
Mhm.
is that, okay, we're going to be completely transparent as a company, so
Mhm.
everybody can know just about everything, unless it's like an HR issue, right? But as an employee owner, you're an owner of this company, you have the responsibility to treat that information appropriately,
Okay.
right? Because some
Mhm.
of this stuff
Mhm.
is, our competitors would love to know.
Yeah. Yep.
So there's a huge piece with that,
Mhm.
just being open and transparent. And then there's the continuous improvement
Mhm.
mindset, which, you don't need to be employee owned to have that,
Yeah. Yeah.
but really empowering folks to be
Mhm.
able to come forth with their ideas and
Mhm.
see them taken seriously and
Mhm.
implemented, and they can begin to see, I have agency within my position, right? And that's
Mhm.
super important, particularly for everybody, but particularly for young people,
Yes.
to know, like, they can see the big picture. Okay, this is what this is all about, and I can do something to help advance that, and that helps to begin really create that culture that you're looking for. And then the other thing is you do need short-term rewards.
Okay.
Right. So I can't just throw it out there in the future.
Yeah.
So you have to be profitable enough to do it, but we have profit sharing. Again, we've had for quite a while. And so every year we take a percentage of our profit and it goes to the employee owners, just like a dividend would go to employee owners of a private, something on the stock exchange. So there's many, many more small things that need to be done continuously to help reinforce it. Education around how the business works, education around how the employee stock ownership plan works. But when you do all those things and you begin to get that culture where people really take ownership and really begin feeling part of a greater whole, that's when really all those benefits come. So, there's the maybe obvious ones that, people in employee-owned companies, they tend to make more than their competitive peers. They have greater retirement savings. They're something like 4 times less likely to be laid off. Particularly young folks build wealth at a much quicker rate in employee-owned companies. So there's those financial and security benefits. But then because of that, you've got engaged, empowered people. When that culture develops, then you're outperforming your competition. And it's, there's studies that show that employee-owned companies with the, special sauce ingredient of the right culture, I forget what the statistic is, but it's something like a very large percentage more competitive, higher revenue, higher profit. And then taking that, just growing that box outside of the employee owners, it really, with employee ownership, everybody wins, right?
Yeah.
So employee-owned companies, those jobs are going to stay local. Super important, right, for the local economy. They tend to get more engaged with the communities, and they'll group together with other employee-owned companies to get more engaged. So the communities getting all this extra energy. If you look at some of the downturns that we've been through, because there's fewer layoffs, the government saves a ton of money on unemployment benefits. So it's really a society-wide benefit. Everyone benefits.
Wow. I wanted to pick up on what is coming out of what you've just described. To me, it seems for the management or the leadership, there is like a call to being even more than courageous, right? Where you now are transparent and you're willing to hear, even though you might have, some other knowledge but you're willing to converse with all the employees. And I also see on the other side, on the part of the employees, really rising up as well, which also requires courage, right? And being accountable, responsible with the information, and really embracing the ownership sort of culture. And then I'm also seeing just sort of normal business or system-wide issues when you talk about continuous improvement. And I wanted to touch on, your company explains, and it's very clear in the mission and some of the stuff that's on your website, on grit. You speak a lot about having grit, and I'm connecting it to the company being a 65-year-old company, if I'm not wrong, and having 23 years as an employee-owned company, so which leaves 42 years of transitioning, which to me really is testament to the grit, because this takes a lot, right? So it's not just simple, and it's for someone who is thinking long term. It's not only about short term. You did highlight some of the short term benefits, but it's really, it requires a long-term mindset. Would you agree with me, or I'm not interpreting this correctly?
No, that's
Mhm.
absolutely true.
Mhm.
And construction, I'm sure it's probably true in
Yeah.
some other industries,
Mhm.
but it's a risky business. And the saying goes that in construction, you can make money by the shovelful, but you can lose it by the dump truck load.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
So, so you have to be on the game all the time, and you
Mhm.
have to think long term. You have to think
Mhm.
about your cash flow and how are you going to grow. You have to have, like, one of our core values is smart growth. You have to have smart growth. You can't get out ahead of yourself.
Okay.
Um, so it's an absolutely long-term thing. Our strategic vision goes out, or we could call it our aspirational vision, goes out 10 years, right?
Okay.
It's like, where do we want to be 10 years from now? And what
Okay.
are the steps along that path? And then every year you make sure that you're headed towards it.
Okay.
Did I cover that fully
Yeah.
for you?
Yeah, you did. So I wanted to pick from there. The next question is around, do you see any relationship between employee ownership and some of your equity goals? And I'm particularly interested in this question, knowing construction with gender equity. How has that been translated in your company? How is it showing up? Yeah, because construction companies are known for not being very not having the spaces for gender
Right.
representation, even a lot of like equity questions.
Issues. Right.
Do you think your company has been, because of it being an employee-owned company, how has that really transpired?
So I think there's a synergistic interplay there, right? So
Mhm.
you know, in the entire time I've been here, which is 40 years,
Mhm.
there's always been a goal, a desire to, bring more women on board, bring more minorities on board, to have better equity to, a certain extent, because it's like always worrying about, are you still competitive, right? If you get too out of whack. But I think one of the things that's really starting to get into our DNA, particularly in the entire executive team level, is that the shareholders of this company are the employees, right? So, so, if there's a little more equity going over here, it's not that we're becoming less competitive. It just means that there's a benefit to those employee owners as shareholders that there wouldn't otherwise be. And as long as we still have the cash flow and can grow the share price, et cetera, that it's not just a one-sided equation. That makes more sense when you're thinking about it from, we're all actually employee owners. So really seeing huge strides along those lines. And again, getting employee owners really involved with that process. So several years ago, I don't know how many, we started a DEI board made up of employee owners who really dug deep and explored these questions in the light of, okay, these are our shareholders too, right? They're just not, hired hands. And traditionally, those craft folks, those people that are actually putting the value in place in the field, the big disparity between not just salary, but also what do you have for vacation and holiday and sick leave and bereavement and on and on. And they aren't 100% on par, but they came way up, closer to being more equitable. And the inclusion piece is huge. You got to pay attention to that all the time, because it's human behavior. But we do a lot of training around that. And I'm not sure how to phrase this, but when you really begin to get that employee owner culture, just a healthy culture, period, everybody's got their back, right? And if everybody's got each other's back and you're always supporting, like, oh, here, I'll help you up if you've fallen down, that's where the inclusion comes in, so that you don't have, let's put it this way. I do a lot of work with team alignment on team health with our projects. And one of the things we do is we all sit down at the beginning of the project and build, what are our norms? How do we want to behave together? And I try to talk to both the positive, like, what's your best team experience? And we go through that, but then, like, what's your worst? And I remember somewhere it was like, hey, go in the office, close the door. Right. And the community, or there's one person on the team and nobody really that interacts with them, right? For whatever reason. And that you have to surface those things and be able to see them first, and then you can do something about them. So the inclusion part, I think, because we're all employee owners, because we're spending more time on those kind of team health dynamics, is also come up a long ways. And as far as the gender side goes, I mean, we're missing half the workforce in our industry, right? And we've been incredibly proactive with that. And as a matter of fact, we've got 2 senior vice presidents that are women, that are incredible leaders. One of them's my boss. And we've there's a women in construction movement that's started, and so we always send a huge cadre to that, and then we hold a women in construction conference with the women, including the folks from the field, get them together, and it's really taking off. And as a matter of fact, we, in our last town hall, there was a comment said, hey, can we do the women in construction, more often, like get together, even if it's on a Teams call. And Matt was our CEO, was like, absolutely, let's make it happen. So that's come a long way. There's still the old boy attitude a little bit sometimes out in the field that you got to watch very closely, where people make comments that shouldn't be made, and you got to try to nip those in the bud. But I think it's getting better.
Okay, great. I was very interested in this question because it's something that I'm investigating with my sort of greater research, because the whole question of shared wealth should obviously be linked, still yet to find out, with sort of the equity question as well. And I loved how you answered it and how you're addressing it. And I'm beginning to see a little bit of clarity on how it's connected. So thank you for answering that question so well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to ask you, because each road, each journey has like challenges, just a little bit on maybe one key challenge that you encountered on transitioning from being a private-owned company to an employee-owned company, or where you are right now is 100% employee-owned company. What's the one thing that you might want to share with, especially a business owner who's trying to navigate succession planning and thinking about exiting? What can they prepare themselves for? What is that one challenge that you think was a huge one? I know these decisions are not easy. Like most of the stuff we're talking about today is very challenging. But perhaps what is that one challenge, and then how did you manage to overcome it?
All right, well, I'm going to give you 2. Sorry, I can't help it.
Okay.
So the first one is that, the most fraught change of leadership is from that first one, right? Where you had the privately owned company with stable leadership that went between the 3 brothers over years, but they were like one team, right? They knew each other's minds, they knew their capabilities, and then you're passing it on to somebody else. And so that's the one that I think is probably the highest likelihood of failure. It's even a likelihood of failure if it's going from generation to generation. So we did not have a problem with that, but it's just that it's so important. And the brothers did an incredible job with that because they had built the leadership team, had them in place, had a president in place, but then they stuck around, right?
Yeah.
So they stuck around connected with the company, working for the company for a few years, and then they said, okay, but now we're just going to be on the board. And there was just one of them on the board, just so that they could be there for guidance and to see the transition through. So that first step is you need to be very I'm not struggling for the word, but proactive and thoughtful about doing that. The other piece is that, employee-owned companies are less likely to fail, right? That doesn't mean they don't. So there's no magic bullet here, like all the regular business fundamentals apply. And we had a period of time, and there's a lot of things that got wrapped up into how we got ourselves into trouble. But maybe the primary one is that we grew too fast. It wasn't smart growth. And our growth outpaced our capacity from a human standpoint to manage it all. And so that was really scary, right? And it's really hard in any company, but an employee-owned company, and people see their stock price falling. And to try to right the ship and keep people on board, as you're turning the corner. And we did it. And things are great now, and we're on a great trajectory, and we've got that culture back. But just remember that just because you're employee owned doesn't mean that it's a magic bullet. You still have to have the really good fundamentals and pay attention.
I like how you said, I'm going to give you two. And in my mind, I was like, I'll take those because they're very important. Both points that you've highlighted are extremely important. And I think there's also something that you spoke about, which was like education, like you need to invest in just educating everyone. And the piece that you are pointing to now is self-education for the owners, like know how, other employee-owned companies have done it. Take time to maybe investigate a little bit about the employee ownership community, if that is the way that you want to go, and the ecosystem. So you do have consultants as well who can help you. You can also contact VEOC. I'm not plugging in directly, but I am for help, because these are difficult challenges. Even how to make, like in the case where you find yourself, you're in trouble because of business fundamentals, how to then, keep everyone, because you now have all the employees. It's not just your shareholders that you're accountable to. So how to navigate that, I'm sure also requires a lot of coaching, and those services are also available. There are consultants who are doing great work with helping. So sometimes I find business owners rely on maybe their financial advisor and their banker, and maybe their family. But to also know that there's help outside, there's a community of employee ownership consultants, coaches, and so on that can help to transition successfully.
Absolutely. I just, along the same lines, we've had lots of conversations over the years with owners of other companies that are thinking about it, right? And they want to come and hear the story and learn some more. And sometimes that's the most comfortable place for folks to start. They don't want to get pulled too far in, but I would just say that, with the VEOC, give Matt a call, or executive director, and he knows everybody. Right. And you can just call him and say, Matt, I'm just thinking, can you give me some people in other employee-owned companies that are in my sector that can you connect me so that I can just go have a chat with them, and he can do that and leave you there to begin your exploration. So
Oh,
that those connections are important.
excellent. So now we're right at the last question, which is just what type of sort of human resources policies and practices complementary with employee ownership? I'm asking this question because I know some of the fears that business owners have is if someone comes in and you give them a job, right? They have a job spec, they know what's expected, and they probably have the technical competencies to do with the job. But now, if it's an employee-owned company, there's that perception that the person is not only coming in as an employee, but also the ownership piece. And the perception is that distorts some of, the HR, I don't know, policies. So I want to hear, do you think there's a contradiction, or the HR policies still stand in terms of what you're expected to, if it's ethics for the organization, and it's got nothing, it does not conflict in any way with the employee ownership piece? What are your thoughts on that? And just clarifying that. I don't know if I'm explaining myself quite.
I think so. I'll see if I got it, and you can point me in the right direction, Lizah. So I don't think there is any contradiction there at all. And I really don't think, I mean, it's a little bit, maybe if you're beginning as an employee-owned company, that first, like, okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I get to decide how I do my work? So that
what
early
time I
transition,
come in, or,
right?
Because yes, I'm sure, flexi hours and all of that applies to even non-employee-owned companies. But are there any contradictions?
Yeah, so I think there's misperceptions can be early on if you're transitioning from private to employee owned. And that's where the education piece comes in big time. And like you said, there's lots of resources. VEOC staff goes and actually meets, as people are even considering it, so they can explain what will it mean when we get there. And then during the transition, because it's an education piece, right? And once people understand it, okay, I get it. I don't get to make my own hours and decide my own wages. So all the HR policies stay the same. They may shift over time because of being employee owned, and that sort of virtuous cycle I was talking about, where, maybe we want some more equity because, these are employee owners, and it's actually a return of money to a shareholder as opposed to something else, or a benefit, et cetera. But I think for once you're a little bit more mature ESOP, it's really almost the other way around. People come to the company. Now, sometimes their eyes are big about, they like the concept of employee ownership and they're more curious, but a lot of times they're like, okay, so I'm an employee owner, so what? I got a retirement plan. And that's where you have to do the work to help them understand that, hey, as an employee owner, you own stock in this company. Guess who can make that stock price move? We can. Nobody else can. We can. If you own Apple stock, you can go buy 100 iPhones. It's not going to move the stock price, right?
Yeah.
So to begin to have them understand that they do have agency as far as helping drive their future wealth.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris. Just in sort of closing this conversation, I also just wanted to thank you for not only coming in and having this conversation, but even the work that you have done as a VEOC board member. Chris, does get his hands dirty. So like I was saying right at the beginning, being involved in a lot of like pulling the ecosystem I was talking about, other employee-owned companies here in Vermont, and doing drives, fundraising, and really making employee ownership have an impact in the community and building that community resilience, and just your humility in the way that you do everything. I just wanted to thank you. I don't know if you have any questions for me, because I've been questioning you and sometimes confusing you.
No, I don't think you confused me, Liza, and I want
Yeah.
to say thanks as well for doing this. I think it's great that this is going to help put a lot out there for people who are considering employee ownership or just want to understand it better. And I have to say, that personally, and as the VEOC, we feel really lucky that you are on the team this summer and
Thank you.
continuing to work on your thesis. And it's really broadened my thinking beyond where it's been. So it's a mutual thing. So
Thank
appreciate
you, Chris. Thank you. Cheers.
it. Bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.